So today I would like to talk about the awakening, the spiritual awakening, Kundalini awakening, and kind of giving a different perspective on the awakening, because people speculate, they imagine a lot of things. Our current spirituality is so much engrossed in the current dimension and its limitations that sometimes we become blinded by the limitations. We think that we learn something or experience something. Even if we have these glimpses of experiences, these experiences sometimes or very often actually limit us. We have to understand that this current dimension operates in a certain way, and it's programmed by our language. So when we evolve, we transit from the written or spoken language, mostly written language, into spoken transmission. So when people think that it's an achievement when there is a written transmission, written transmissions are already a degraded version of the actual higher knowledge transmission or the knowledge transmission in general. So, but it's a way to speak the language of the current dimension and people. So written transmissions are not any achievements. They're just a way to kind of knock on the door of the current human consciousness. The further we evolve, the more we transcend from the language paradigm. So the transmission becomes kind of more abstract and beyond the words. So even when you practice certain mantras and certain, you read about certain things, you're still within this programmed reality. This programmed reality is called so matrix in other ways, is because everything is words. Even when you are at peace, when you are sitting, relaxing yourself somewhere or with some other people, there's an ongoing dialogue, or there's an ongoing, this program is running through the mind. So the way this current dimension, this current world, this particular yuga or the age been programmed, it's the way our mind is bound to this dimension. So the mind is bound to this dimension through words. It's kind of like 0101 is running. The program is running continuously, even if you are at peace, until you awaken. And many people dream of awakening. They assume they have awakened. They think that certain spiritual experiences shifted their perspective, and yet these are temporary experiences. Spiritual awakening is very, very rare. And it's rare because most of the people cannot unbind themselves from this programming, from this programmed reality. Yes, they may have glimpses of absorption, but they at the same time have also their traumas, traumatic responses to reality, which are bound to words, to commands of this reality. And again, these are all words, right? So the words can become tools if they are understood properly, or the way, if you properly understand the way this dimension is programmed, you can eventually transcend the programming. And that's where the knowledge of certain verbal seeds or mantras comes into play. But this knowledge is self-preserved. It cannot be revealed to people whose minds are still bound to this reality. And the purity of mind is not defined by your actions or what good thoughts or bad thoughts. It's defined by your ability to tune into this higher frequency. Now we have to define what the higher frequency is. And the higher frequency means the reality beyond words. that unified field which exists beyond words. And this is when you experience the awakening. But awakening doesn't mean that you've just accessed that reality for a second, for a glimpse, for a month, or for a year. It means that you're established in it. So you may have different moments throughout your life when you experience these glimpses of amanaska, or no mind, or the perception of reality beyond words, beyond the programming. And yet, if you do not comprehend properly this reality, you may assume and mix it again with your limited perception, with your ego, in other words. So you will assume that there is some kind of a progress, there's some kind of an evolution. Now, this reality beyond words is our natural being. It's natural, but it has become unnatural because we have gone disconnected from this reality beyond words. And so the more we transform and evolve, which is again a rare situation, the more we go from the language paradigms, from the written transmissions into oral and beyond, where knowledge becomes more and more abstract and more of a nature of reality. And again, many people can speak about it, but they are not that. They are not that transmission. They're not that being. It's like many people write books, but that knowledge that is written is not their being, is not their emanation. So they fool themselves. True Siddha writings and the transmissions of perfected beings of a different kind. These beings transmitted knowledge that has been not of the highest order, but that would be useful for people of this generation, of this time and age. And even though it may sound like a very advanced knowledge, it's still not that of an advanced knowledge. The knowledge itself is self-preserved. So when people want to play with knowledge, get access to something, if that is not permitted by their consciousness, by the frequency of their being, they will be just fooling themselves and causing themselves extra pain. Pain because pain indicates being in the wrong flow or resisting something. So and we're talking about naturally occurring pain, emotional pain, mental pain, indicates that you're not in the natural flow. You may think you are awakened, you're enlightened, you have certain achievements, and yet there is a limitation. And this limitation will be manifested through these experiences. When you or your consciousness is dispersed, when the consciousness is dispersed outwards and drains your being, your body, the body starts producing pain. So before we go into any spiritual knowledge or true spiritual experiences that are not just experiences, but become your natural being, we have to deal with the fact that our consciousness wanders outwards, attaches to things in the projected reality, and again, kind of links to it. So most of the people have only fragments or moments of reality, and yet they wish to tie it up to their existence, to the meaning of their existence. But the reality is much smarter. You cannot outsmart or fool the reality. You can fool other people with your words, with your activities, but you can't fool the reality. Because at the core, you know that there is no achievement. All these achievements are within the programmed reality. And this reality doesn't have much meaning. It is just roaming in your own world, trying to make sense out of it. This reality does not have any meaning. If we want to evolve, we need to transcend. We have to go beyond the programming And to go beyond the programming means to awaken to the reality which is beyond the words. And that means to experience absorption beyond words. That's the point. That's called Amanaska Yoga, or the reality beyond, the unified field, which is beyond words. And it doesn't just limit to that, but that's the foundation. You can't say, even if you remain in that reality, that you have integrated. Because if you have not transcended the programming through the glimpses of Amanaska, or no mind, or beyond the reality beyond the programming, there is no use of these experiences. If you still have traumatic responses to the reality, and if the mind goes into negative self-programming modes, or kind of rolling on those negative modes, it means it hasn't refined itself yet. And it will keep on pulling one's consciousness into the limited paradigm. Now, this limited paradigm is the paradigm of ego. It's when the limited consciousness makes sense out of the limited reality. It does not understand the higher reality, because the higher reality has nothing to do with the current world. No matter how we try to bring spirituality into this world, that higher reality remains untarnished by the current programming or the limited world. And so it's very important to realize that, because there is always a tendency for the limited traumatic self to kind of bring in that experience of the higher reality and kind of mince it with the programming and produce something out of it, which is again foolish. The highest knowledge is perceived in silence. But let's say there are many, many experiences which could be called silence by people, but they are the modes of dissociation from the reality. They are the modes of dissociation and withdrawal from the reality, because one refuses to look at one's limited self and to dissolve it. It's easier to fall into the dissociative states and consider oneself enlightened or refined or evolved in some way, and yet still keeping that limited paradigm as a tumor, yet not addressing it as that. So this is one of the biggest traps when people experience some glimpses of the higher reality, and yet their essence is not refined. Their essence is deeply rooted in the trauma. Such people mislead themselves and mislead others. The true awakening is not an achievement, but if it's properly addressed or if it's properly understood, it can become a powerful tool for, first of all, for self-healing, and later on for evolution. But this journey is a very, very painful journey, because we work with the ways that are corrupt within ourselves. We work with our corrupt, limited selves. And these corrupt, limited selves are the pains of our soul, the pains of our existence. So it's not that we are working with something beautiful and pleasant, but we work with our limitations. Limitation in this current world means pain. That's why we're so much afraid of pains. We say we have fear of death. We have fear of pain, not the fear of death. Because pain indicates the limitation. Our consciousness doesn't know what limitation is until and unless it experiences pain. But our consciousness may either dissociate from pain because it's unwilling to work with it, or it may dive into this pain. But the pain has to be transformed one way or the other. It is the sign, it indicates to our consciousness that something is wrong, something is not properly aligned, some imbalance is there, one way or the other. We don't know of imbalance. Sooner or later, the imbalances of consciousness drain us and cause us decay, aging, and eventually pains and agonies of death, so-called. But that is not real death. That is the pain of consciousness that has not been addressed. And so, even when you awakened, you have to go through a lot of transformation. And this transformation is usually very unpleasant because you are dealing with trauma. Trauma means you are facing patterns that corrupt your life, that don't allow you to experience happiness, to experience joy of life. Because consciousness in its balanced way is blissful, is joyful. It's not a bliss of dissociation or withdrawal from your trauma or self-forgetfulness, because that doesn't last. As long as you again face the world, as long as you interact with the world, the trauma will resurface. So the only way to dissolve trauma is to, first of all, admit it to oneself. And through the states of absorption, which is equanimity, one may see, one may recognize the states of pain. And because one recognizes the states of pain, one, again, it doesn't mean that one has achieved anything, but that recognition leads to admitting the corrupt patterns within that strip us of our balance, our happiness. And spirituality is about balance. Health is about balance. Our existence is to strive for balance, but we cannot achieve this balance until we face the pains of imbalance. The pain indicates that this imbalance has gone too far, that our way of being is draining us, whatever that is, whether you are overthinking, whether you are stressing emotionally. Instead of expressing self openly, directly, you are roaming in your thoughts. You are constantly creating shadows and attacking people and the world with your shadows, knowingly or unknowingly. This is the way you create toxicity around yourself. And sooner or later, it returns. And it makes you feel uncomfortable in your own skin. It's because it's much easier, it seems like it's much easier to stay in our corrupt paradigms or in our ego rather than dissolve it, rather than to face it. We think we face it. But unfortunately, our reality shows us otherwise. If you're so evolved, awakened, and enlightened, because these are all different things, again, when you're awakened, it's just the very beginning, because it means you have a chance to bring that higher reality of self and integrate it with the current worldly existence. But it's not going to happen until there is a limited paradigm of self, on ego, narcissism, or any form of self-centeredness where you just do not allow that higher reality to penetrate into the limited paradigms. And you allow the limited paradigms to take over the body. That's where the body is drained. That's where the body eventually starts aching. Because there is no clarity about the priorities of your existence. Your priorities are somewhere else in the programmed reality. That's where this programmed reality rules you or rules over you. It drains you. That's why you get exhausted. That's why you get tired. That's why you feel like you're entrapped and enslaved, but yet you keep on pursuing illusions of the world. It doesn't mean that your body cannot enjoy the worldly paradigm, but the approach to this enjoyment is corrupt because you place your priorities at something that is of an illusionary nature. Yes, it's there, but the focus has to be within oneself. And it comes back to the point of self-love. Everyone speaks about self-love, but who knows of love? Love is a very high frequency that the majority of people on this planet have no idea of, because they have not cultivated this frequency, nor they have never known of that. So the same goes with divinity. People speak about it, propagate, preach, but they have no idea what it is, because they have not experienced this frequency within themselves. And even if they did in glimpses, they haven't cultivated it. So it's an unknown reality. Everyone wants it, but no one knows what that is. And when they experience it, they are frightened because their limited paradigm is now at stake. Their limited paradigm now is threatened. And so it will try to create stronger programming, which means a flow of fearful thoughts to oppose the higher frequency. That's why we constantly face this dilemma in life, love over fear, because love represents our higher self. It represents higher vibration, which we're not aware of, even though everyone speaks about it. This emotional, petty love is not real love. True love is divinity, is higher frequency, is purity. Where the words fail, I may speak for hours of what that is, and yet if you don't have experience of that, you will only speculate. You will only try to imagine and project what you know of love, yet you don't know of love. And that's why we live in this limited paradigm where we dream of love, we dream of divinity, we dream of some kind of a positive reality, but we constantly program ourselves onto some kind of limitation, failures, negativity, because we failed to address that negativity within. We wonder why our life is full of misery. Who produces this misery? Who creates this misery? Is the trauma, the limitation within. This pain that we are facing, one way or the other, on whichever level, when we don't dissociate from reality, when we actually dive into this worldly reality, we dive into communication with people, we open up, because without opening up, without being vulnerable with other people and with the world in general, we cannot know this true pain. Many people hide away from the pain. But living in this disguise, hiding from the pain, doesn't mean that they actually avoid pain. This pain comes to them sooner or later, starts eating them from inside. That's where people suffer many incurable diseases like cancer and other, because it eats them alive. They don't face it. They don't address it early. They don't address their hidden anger. They don't address their hidden emotions. They don't express their emotions. They do not engage authentically in a vulnerable state with the world. Authentically in a vulnerable state means through honesty. Spirituality is the path of honesty, path of openness and open self-expression. That is freedom. And freedom doesn't mean that you are doing what you want, hurting whoever. But if it's your natural response, you're just trying to be natural. Yes, possibly your natural response is the traumatic response that will hurt other people, or you will be hurt. But without this experience, you don't know of life, you don't know of limitation, you don't know of this programming. So you just remain ignorant. By trying to hide away from life, you cannot fool existence. You cannot fool your consciousness. And that's why pain, old age, disease creeps in sooner or later, because consciousness placed value within this projected reality. It's dispersed within the projected reality. It never nurtures its body. Your consciousness never remains within the body. And thus, your body is possessed by fragments of the projected reality, by shadows of other people, mental, emotional shadows of other people, different thoughts, emotions, ideas of yourself. So you're not only fragmented in your own being, but you also kind of dispersed and drained by the fragments of other beings as well. So even though you say that you experience in glimpses wholesome being, still, it's not enough. It's not enough. It has to be cultivated, because that has to become your priority. No matter what other goals you may have in life, that has to be the priority. You become successful in the worldly reality when your focus remains in your body, in your own vehicle. So you strengthen yourself. And when you are aligned and balanced and strengthened, you can express yourself in whichever way. If you're talented in one way or the other, you can do things whatever you want. You can succeed in anything. But if you place value in things that are not really valuable because they're just of the same nature, it's like 0, 1, 0, 1. The projected reality has different pictures, appearances. It's like flickering of the fire. Creation itself is like flickering of the fire. You can make anything out of it. You can find shadows, pictures in it, but it's still fire. So the same is the projected reality. You look at a certain limited aspect and you empower it. You place your value into it. What does it mean then? It means that that limited aspect becomes a way to drain your energy. You believe that it's more powerful than you. Money, fame, career. Everything has a certain necessity there, but it is not more powerful or shouldn't be more powerful or more valuable than your own being. And as long as you place value outside of self, you don't know what self-love is. You don't know the value of your life, the value of your existence, because you placed it elsewhere. You think you placed it in the illusion. You feed this illusion with your consciousness. So where is your spiritual achievement? If you don't understand the value of your own self, you cannot enjoy anything in this world, because your consciousness will be drained. You'll be chasing butterflies, flickering fire, without understanding that you are that fire. And because of that, our spirituality seems to be also very corrupt, because we're chasing spiritual shadows rather than we understand that this spirituality starts from our own being. Even if this being is currently corrupt, in pain, suffering, this very pain, this very suffering can indicate the path to liberation. There's not a single being on this planet at this time, in this cycle, in this age, who does not have shadows or corruption. But it is in our hands to choose to either go with the shadows, to be devoured by the shadows, to be dispersed and drained by the shadows, or to collect ourselves into us, within ourselves, to cherish our existence, to cherish our body, and to align our physical being with the higher being. That is called yoga. That is called awakening. And because of this alignment, because of this humility and vulnerability towards our own being, we can heal, we can transform, and we can actually open up to the natural enjoyment, the enjoyment of our own being, which makes any other external enjoyment even more pleasurable. We can't know the pleasure of the external without being content, equanimous, and aligned with the higher being, realizing that we are that spiritual entity that lives in this body and that enjoys everything. There is no problem with enjoyment, but this enjoyment cannot come from the outside. It has to be discovered within. Self-love, or in other words, equilibrium, balance, has to be discovered first, because the value has to be placed within. And within simply means that you are within your body, you remain inside, you honorably occupy your vehicle, you nurture it instead of constantly wandering with your mind elsewhere. And because of this, because you place your focus within, you start enjoying your existence beyond the shadows of the flickering fire. And even if you observe those shadows or experience them, you are able to enjoy them more. Yet your value will remain within. If you do not understand that your value is within, that this existence has meaning because of your own existence, because of your own conscious existence or being, then you're living in illusion. There is nothing wrong with this programmed world, but it's the mind itself that deludes itself and places value in the illusion. If the mind places value in itself, it instantly experiences the reality of self, which is the higher reality, which is the reality beyond words. And if it cultivates it, it realizes the subtle existence. But the subtle existence is just another programmed reality in a subtle way. But this is the way to progress and evolve. If you want to evolve through stories, feeding yourself with some kind of stories of someone else's lives or achievements or spirituality, or you want to copy other people's lives, you want to be like someone else, it means you don't understand who you are, nor you understand the value of own conscious existence. So you're continuously living in illusion and delusion, even in the name of spirituality. You may be reading other people's stories and projecting it on yourselves. It's delusion. There's nothing wrong in reading the stories, but as long as you connect yourself, your limited self with that, you're in delusion. The majority of people do that. They cannot find their path because they place value outside of themselves, because they empower everything else outside of themselves. So they have no time to empower themselves. To empower themselves doesn't mean to empower the limited paradigm self. It means to empower that which is beyond words. But not everyone can experience that which is beyond words, because you need to collect yourself into that one being. And you cannot collect yourself until and unless you focused within the body. People foolishly think that meditation is going elsewhere. That's a different type of experience. You may say it's a spiritual experience as well. But true meditation is being in that reality of self, yet being fully within your body, possessing your body, instead of it being possessed by fragments and shadows of other beings, of the collective, or your own shadows. So when you are fully within, you're integrated, you're cultivating higher reality, yet within the physical vehicle. That's why your physical vehicle heals, is in balance, experiences bliss. The bliss of the body indicates you are in the flow. But if you, again, connect your sense of self to the bliss and limit yourself this way, again, you're opening the way to imbalance, to pain. Bliss is there, natural, to show you that that is the reality beyond the programming. And yet through that knowledge, you are to deprogram yourself, to dissolve the limited sense of self or the programs of the self. If that is not taking place, you are living in another spiritual delusion. And so there is a very fine line between spirituality and insanity. Most of the people perish and go into insanity because they cannot crack the nut. They cannot crack that limited paradigm, no matter how harsh it sounds. Because to face pain means to admit the limitation and to also let go of it. Dissolution means letting go. But letting go doesn't mean letting go of the world or destruction of your current world. It means understanding priorities, prioritizing within your existence certain things, and yet balancing them at the same time. So the priority is your actual reality of self, which is consciousness, existence beyond the words. The words came into place as the tools to program this reality. We have caused, or we put a spell on ourselves. The higher reality is an abstract reality. It's the reality of all-knowing. But this all-knowing is beyond words. Right now, we cannot even imagine this reality without words. That's why most of the people have difficulty going beyond words in this constant dialogue within their heads, because the program starts running on its own. And so they try different kinds of absurd techniques like concentration, these, that. But the program is running because the corruption is within. You can try to focus on this or that. You can try to use whatever substances or any kind of spiritual techniques, and yet you will not be able to go beyond the program. Awakening is rare. There has to be a certain degree of maturity where the mind can surrender, can learn to surrender and let go into the flow. It means to go beyond the paradigm of control. Traumatic response to reality means our desire to constantly control the flow of life. And it's bound to fear of loss, to fear of mistake. And yet through this paradigm, we constantly drain ourselves. Mistake is not your action or word. Mistake is the way you allow your being to be drained by this reality. So You're constantly trying to be in control of your behavior, in control of your words, and yet you keep on draining yourself through that. Instead of allowing yourselves to be natural, authentic, and vulnerable. That's why true spirituality is still unknown, because we don't know this frequency of vulnerability, authenticity, or even if we do know in glimpses, we run away from it. We're afraid. We think that if we're not in control and become vulnerable and open and authentic, that we're going to make a mistake, that we're going to hurt ourselves. But we hurt ourselves on and on by allowing ourselves to go with the corruption, to go with fear, to go with control. Most of our actions are tied up to fear and control. And that is called ego. So if we cannot know, if we don't know until now what ego is and what causes us pain, then it is fear and control. Inability to allow oneself to be open, to be vulnerable, to be emotionally open, expressive. And these things lead us to mental health issues. We don't realize why our society suffers mental health issues, mental emotional imbalances, because we suppress ourselves. We're afraid to be authentic. We're afraid to be open and vulnerable with other beings, with the world in general. We keep on hiding, keep on creating false paradigms for ourselves to explain our existence, to become something in this reality. When, if we placed proper priority within, we wouldn't need to prove this illusion that we're something. We wouldn't need to become anything in this illusion. We would just be what we are rather than what we are not. So we spend so much energy, so much resources of our existence to just prove the illusion something, or prove the illusion that which we are not. We're trying to become something. And yet, on the way, we drain our vital energy resources. That's where we age. That is the curse of this age. The curse of this age is short span of life, because we don't prioritize ourselves. We don't place value in our existence just as we are. We focus on our traumas rather than letting them go. We focus on our pains rather than observing the way that they occur and the psychological, emotional reasons for that. Our pain occurs because another reason for pain is that we suppress our emotions, or we focus on something so important, yet it drains us, it drains our organs, depletes the energy of our body, of our organs or certain systems. And that's why they fail. That's why they start stagnating and hurting. To indicate that we have to focus there rather than elsewhere and deplete ourselves. So in order to resolve these issues, mental issues, emotional issues, we need to simply learn to express ourselves openly, without fear, respecting the flow of own life, realizing that life itself is a great teacher and there is no mistake. We have to go with the higher vibration rather than lower pains and fears and insecurities. Because if we go with those, maybe we find secure paradigms, maybe we find some limited niches, but these limitations stagnate us, block our evolution, and then we just waste our lives. No one can punish ourselves more than ourselves by making wrong choices, by choosing to go with our limitations, with our ego, with the control, with fears, with insecurities, with traumas. We create shadows in our existence, and these shadows affect our lives, affect the lives of people around us, and we don't even realize that. It is an unconscious process. And then we wonder why we become victims of this world, because what goes around comes around. If you're pure, you don't leave shadows. Not to leave shadows in this world or in this reality means free, open, authentic self-expression, directness, honesty. Not foolish honesty, but when you deal with the reality, you are authentic self. You express yourself verbally, emotionally, so you don't leave shadows. This is the life of saints. That's why they say that for those who were truly evolved beings, say that they choose the path of truth. The path of truth means you are authentic being from top to bottom. You express yourself and there are no afterthoughts. If you have afterthoughts, it means you express yourself through masks, through the programming, through trauma. Free expression means nothing's left. The vessel is emptied. That's why there are no thoughts. Thoughts, wandering, dreaming comes from unexpressed emotions, from unexpressed being. Perversion comes from the same. All of these are expressions of the trauma, of the traumatic limited being. And so, before we go into true spirituality or even have an ability to connect to it somehow through our own frequency, higher frequency, maybe this frequency is to a certain degree there, in a small degree, it will still pull you out if you acknowledge it, if you hold on to it. But without resolving all these traumas and traumatic responses, without allowing yourself to be authentic for once, you cannot break through. True spiritual knowledge is self-protected. It's self-protected by frequency. The same goes with divinity and love. You cannot force these things because this is a certain frequency. If your priority is on lower frequency of yourself, you may speak about love, you may dream of it, you may dream of divinity and spirituality, yet you will not come across it. Because this is the frequency that you either cannot cultivate within yourself yet, you haven't experienced yet, or maybe you're completely devoid of. Because your priority is elsewhere. Because you're cultivating some other type of frequency. Perhaps the frequency of the trauma, the frequency of your ego. Even if you explain it as the way you're spiritually evolving, or you can explain it to others, you can fool others maybe. You can say that you are a spiritually evolved being, yet your trauma will come through shaking of your body, through micro movements of your body, through restlessness, through anxiety that you can't hide. Because our nervous system transmits what we are. Our facial expressions transmit what we are. So we can't fool reality. We maybe can pretend that we're something else, but if we're not aligned, it will transpire. Our nervous system will bring it up one way or the other. People who do not address pains of the soul, emotional pains, suffer these pains in the body. We have a lot of people who suffer from so-called fibromyalgia or other type of pains, and they don't realize that these pains are the pains of the soul shadow, or the shadows of other people through which they're connected, with whom they are connected. Our body is a spiritual instrument. It tells us exactly what we need to know of ourselves. If we can fool people through words, if we can find a way into this material world through words, through some kind of fake masks and charisma, we cannot fool ourselves and our body, because it will show us exactly what we are. And if certain things are there, if trauma is unresolved, the body will be shaking, there will be micro movements, there will be restlessness and anxiety, which are the first indicators of the presence of trauma, negative energy, and ego. The moment we let go, we realize that true reality of ourselves is that relaxed, equanimous, blissful being. And we focus on that, we cultivate that. Then our life builds up as a proper kind of a spiritual building. We exist in a proper alignment where we are grounded, where everything in our life is in alignment and harmony. But the root is within ourselves, within our nervous system, within our body. Our body is our indicator of either balance and health and equanimity, or something else. And if it's something else, it means that this body is calling us to focus within and nurture it. Because without our body, we cannot evolve, and we cannot enjoy this reality. We cannot understand the purpose of our existence in this world. And the purpose is only for ourselves. There is only one purpose, balance, one way or the other. You may explain your reality in different or through different paradigms and concepts and beliefs, yet there is only one purpose, which is balance. And this balance has to reflect on your body. If it's not there, then something is off, something is not right. Spirituality is balance, the body is the fruit. Whatever you do in the name of spirituality, if it doesn't reflect on your body, if your nervous system is still anxious, restless, no matter what you say, how you fool other people, what you try to pretend or be, it doesn't matter. The reality of yourself is there in the body. You can come out of the body, come in the body, but the body will always reflect what you are. And this is how we cannot fool other people, because it's a reflection of who you are and always will be. Yes, there can be some situations where there is a certain damage, but again, things happen because of certain things in consciousness. And so if you are living a healthy life consciously, and I'm talking about conscious health, which is open self-expression, direct self-expression, authentic, vulnerable self-expression. You don't hide behind the masks, because to maintain masks takes much more energy than to be authentic. So to be authentic, to be spiritual is easy. But our minds are very complex. They are rooted in the illusion, and the illusion is complex because it's coded in a complex language. That's why when you start the journey, spiritual journey, you simplify your life, you simplify your existence, because you withdraw from complexity of existence. You withdraw from complex ideas into simple being within your body, cultivating that higher frequency, period. And through that, you learn to let go and flow, to trust, to surrender, to be who you are rather than to try to become something else or living in an attempt to be something you're not. When you embrace yourself as you are, with all that maybe insecurity and fear, you start realizing that self-love is not different from your natural equanimous being. That is that true self. But it doesn't have masks. It doesn't have any tags. It doesn't need to impress anyone. It doesn't need to become anything. It is not looking for validation. The limited self, ego, is looking for validation. That emptiness of disconnection from the higher being looks for validation, looks for energy from outside. That's where spiritual vampirism comes from. This is the age of spiritual vampirism. People are looking for energy. People are looking for something outside of self. And that validation they get from outside of themselves gives them a certain kick, energy, but doesn't last long. And so they need to keep on creating something outside of themselves or out of themselves so that they can fool this reality into giving them energy, supporting them, validating them. But when you're a natural self, you're connected with the source. You have inexhaustible source of energy. And this is very rare as the awakening, as rare as spiritual advancement and self-refinement, because it's so simple, yet people are looking for the truth in the illusions of the world, including the spiritual illusions and delusions. And they perish through these delusions, unfortunately. Thank you very much.